This is Still a Part of Us, a podcast where moms and dads share the story of their child who was stillborn or who died in infancy. I'm Lee Red, and in this episode of advice and encouragement from a lost dad, I chat with Paul, whose son, Henry, who was stillborn at 38 weeks due to a fetal maternal hemorrhage. By the way, you could hear Paul's wife's episode about the birth of their child on episode 66. Today, Paul and I discussed many things, and one of them was to allow the feelings to come and allow yourself to feel them. Another one was define yourself outside. There is peace in nature. As a word of caution to our listeners, this discussion contains emotional triggers of stillbirth and infant loss. Please keep yourself emotionally and mentally healthy and seek help if needed. Hope this helps somebody out there. Welcome back to Still a Part of Us. I'm Lee Red, and I've got Paul with me, and he's going to be telling about his son. Paul?
Hi. Yeah, my name is Paul. My wife is Erin. Our son was Henry David, and he died just about exactly 1 year ago. And so that would have been a year ago yesterday. He was born, what would be a year ago tomorrow.
And it's got to be 1 year fresh. We go to a grief support group, and one of the moderators, she lost her twins, and she talks about how grief is like this ever slowly expanding box, and in the middle of the box there's a button that is grief. And right when you experience the stillbirth or loss of a child, the box is almost the same size as the ball, and it's constantly hitting that button, and you constantly have the feelings dredged up. But as the box slowly expands and the ball starts to roll around, it will hit the button every once in a while. But you're a year out, we're 2 years out, and sometimes it feels like that ball is stuck on that button. And I hope you're able to find some solace, especially with this first year anniversary coming up tomorrow. So
Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
We read a quote that says, grief returns with the revolving year.
Yeah.
I thought that was well put.
With the revolving year. Do you have any sage wisdom or advice? Or yeah, I said before, most people hate that term, like, oh, this is an advice episode. But has there been anything that you've found in the past year, or somebody has said to you that you think, yeah, a father or somebody who's grieving, this helped me, this could help them?
Well, I have thought about it quite a bit, and I probably am not going to come up with anything too sage, unfortunately, but I have thought about it. I think one thing that was good for us is they gave us a book right when we were in the hospital that talks about surviving the death of a child. And we would read that. I would read it out loud to my wife, small section by small section. And we found that was helpful, so we could get terminology to talk about this with each other and some ideas of what to expect. And yeah, I felt like that was good. I would recommend having a book and kind of going over it together if you can with your partner. It's really important to allow the feelings to come and give them expression, I think. And so maybe that is harder for a guy sometimes. And grief is different. Not everyone's going to grieve the same way, but I think probably almost no matter what, the feelings that accompany grief are going to come in waves, it feels like.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's an important thing to do, to allow yourself to feel those emotions. And whatever that ends up motivating you to do. I cried a lot. I just cried a lot. So that was big for me. But I wrote a poem about it. We did some things surrounding the memorial service we had for him that I felt were ways of remembering him, thinking about him, going through pictures that we had of him, and that would just call up feelings. And you mentioned a really good illustration already about how grief can be and change over time. The nurse that took care of us told us about how grief could be like a weight or a rock that changes in size over time. And at first it's so large it feels like it's crushing you and there's no way out of it. But in time it gets smaller and eventually is something that you can carry around, although it's hard.
Yeah.
and then eventually is something that you carry around in a way where it's small enough to maybe fit in your pocket, even that you can almost choose to take out to look at and feel about when you feel capable of doing it. So I felt like that was good to try to feel like, yes, we're feeling the way we are right now, but it is going to change over time. So having different ways to think about it, that comparing it to something like you did or she did, I feel like was a helpful thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. That rock analogy is so true. Like as the rock crushes you, you can't really think, oh, in the future this will be better.
No, you
'Cause,
can't.
but once it starts to, you can start to hold it, then you can see, my grief in the past was so much greater, but I still have it, but it's not as soul crushing as it was.
Mm.
I like that analogy.
It was hard for months. I felt like my job was to convince my wife and to reassure her that this was going to get better somewhat, not better like all the way, but
Yeah.
she wasn't going to feel the same way forever. Because for her, she resisted believing that. She thought she was the exception.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's been good to be outside. I will take runs through the woods near our house, and I found that to be a very good activity for me. Calming, help me let go of some things, see the beauty in nature.
There is peace in nature. There is. Has there been any token or momentum or totem that you have personally come to carry around with you or keep by you? I got a tattoo, and
Yeah.
it's my family. It's like you can, they call them genograms, like genealogical grams, anagrams, or something like that. And it shows my family, which is the most important thing to me. So, and that's a constant reminder that there is something greater than myself. There is my family. Has there been anything for you that you've?
I would say not really. We have a small urn with Henry's cremated remains. The man at the funeral home kept on saying that phrase over and over again, which I'd never heard before, cremated remains.
Yeah.
And it was dignified. And eventually I was like, yeah, I guess that is the best term for it. And so that has an honored place in our home. And Aaron has made a shelf of memento type things for him. So I'm glad those things exist in my house, but not for me personally. I feel
Yeah.
like Aaron has derived more benefit from that than me, or maybe I just haven't found mine yet.
You haven't
As
found
a
yours.
way of remembering or doing something for this year anniversary, we planted a tree in our yard, a weeping cherry tree. And that was not my idea, but I wholeheartedly support that, and I really like being able to look outside and see it there.
Oh, that's beautiful. How fast should the tree grow? Like
I
there's
don't know. It doesn't get too big. It only gets to be about 15 feet tall, I guess.
oh
But
that's
right now, it only has a few branches and it's not flowering. So I will have to wait at least till next year
yeah,
to see more what its potential is. But it seems fitting right now. It's more, it's young,
yeah.
it's new. We can go out and water it.
Well, that's beautiful. A weeping cherry. Did you say
Yeah.
just your local nursery had it, or did you
Yeah.
have to special order it?
No, no, it was here.
Well, that's cool. Um, we have this is completely off topic, but we have a decorative cherry, and it doesn't produce fruit, but
Okay.
it produces the blossoms, and they're just beautiful, beautiful cherry blossoms.
Yeah.
And a decorative cherry. So your weeping cherry. I hope you get those beautiful pink blossoms, and they just shower like snow in the early spring. So, any other advice? Good, bad? Do this, don't do that.
Okay. Let me think. I did have something to say about maybe something not to say.
Spill the beans.
Just a couple of things actually that are real basic, and I found like our friends were really great about this whole thing. But one thing that you can do when you are really concerned about someone is to start every conversation you have with them with a very pronounced and like you really mean it and you really want to know the answer. How are you?
Yeah.
Or how are you? maybe sometimes it's like kind of more like trying to nudge you in the direction of feeling better. So how are you? But however it's done, that's a hard question to answer over and over again when you're feeling really terrible. So if you know someone's feeling really terrible, try to start a conversation in any other way than that. It's
Be-
probably good.
yeah, because you might get an honest answer from.
Yeah, and sometimes
Yeah,
I would just tell people,
it
and that was okay,
sucks.
but it was kind of yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I
And
lived.
also, oh no, what?
I was going to say I lived in Russia for a while, and I learned not to ask how are you because sometimes the Russians are just brutally honest. You'd ask an older person like, "How are you?" That sucks. The air is cold. I got bad feet. I got aching back. You're like, ooh. Well, I did ask how are you, and you did answer me.
Yes. Here it's
So
like just saying hello, but it
yeah,
can be a loaded question.
it is a loaded question.
Also, I think it is natural to want to find common ground with someone. And so if you're just talking about it with someone for the first time and you're telling them how your son died and it was a stillbirth and whatever, and the first thing out of their mouth is to say, "Oh, I know someone, their cousin, their best friend from high school, somebody, the same thing happened to them, or something just like that happened to them." I did not find that to be super comforting. If you really know someone who went through a very similar thing, like it actually was for like in our case, it was a
Yeah,
full term thing. It was a stillbirth. Maybe they even died from a somewhat similar cause or something.
yeah.
Well, that is interesting to me, and I would like to know that. Maybe I'd like to reach out to that person and hear more. But to try to make a person feel better by saying that there's so many people who have gone through something just the same, when maybe you're talking about people who have had a miscarriage, which of course is somewhat common and very difficult to go through.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not making it out like that's not a big deal. That is a big deal. But to me, the effect of people saying that when I would open up and say what had just happened to me, it kind of felt like it was cheapening
Yeah.
or making more common my experience. And I know that it's good to build community, a sense of community, and like you're not alone. So I get that. But just in that first moment when you're opening up to hear that back, I didn't I didn't feel like that was the best thing.
Our situations are so personal to ourselves. And like you were saying, like it sort of cheapens my own experience when you're like, oh yeah, my best friend's second cousin's neighbor's dog's breeder groomer had the same thing happen. And you're like,
So it's kind of like it was now on a level playing
well,
field, I guess.
thanks.
Okay.
Yeah. One thing that has really helped us is when people, it's okay to say, oh, you don't have to find commonality at first. You could say, that sucks.
Yeah.
It could just be as easy as, I'm sorry, I don't know what to say. And that sucks. I'm sorry. I don't know what to say. And that, like you were saying, it's, you don't have to find, your 15th degree of separation, like, oh yeah, that happened to this person. Like you said, just acknowledge that this is my pain. So,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Totally. But definitely don't ignore someone or not talk to them because you're worried about saying the wrong thing. Because I would say
oh,
as long as you're saying something from the heart, even if it is something that I could feel like, well, that could be a little bit offensive. It's not going to hurt me. It's
yeah,
better to try to be there and try to listen and try to say anything.
yeah.
That is better. I wouldn't want to make people feel like they shouldn't approach someone who had a loss. That's not good.
Thanks for reminding me about that. You don't want people not to say anything. Yeah.
Yeah. But a lot of people did things that really did help us. People sent us some beautiful letters. One one person came over even without asking. He said he thought if he'd asked, I would have said he shouldn't come. It was right after,
Yeah.
but he just came and showed up, texted me that he was outside, and when I came out, because my wife wasn't ready to have any visitors, I just went outside and he gave me a hug and kind of teared up and cried a little with me, and then he left. But that was a big thing.
A simple yet strong show of solidarity with you.
Yeah, and people were. Aaron, this is one of the things she had set up for this whole thing was to have food brought over to the home have people set up on a little bit of a schedule so no one was overburdened with it, but for a couple weeks after, so that the idea was we'd actually have a baby and we wouldn't have to be worrying about food prep during the first couple weeks. And a lot of those people were still willing to bring some food over while we were trying to, get out from under
Yeah.
the crazy grief feeling. And that was very nice. A simple thing, but it helped. I think the one other thing I wanted to mention was the grief changes. And I don't want to ever say like, I know how someone else is going to feel. I really do just know how I feel and what I've read about. But I get the sense that grief feels one way at first, and it is crushing and just unbelievable. And you're trying to start to process it, and your brain knows it can't handle something all at once that's that big. And so it breaks it up into a process. And so some months go by, and it is terrible that the process to last so long because you're like, when's it going to be done? But it probably would be worse if it happened all at once. There's really like a protective mechanism involved. But I think what that leads to is somewhere in between 3 and 6 months, it gets worse, or it did for us. And it's more of the reality of what happened is sinking in. Everything is becoming more real. And so for us, that was the most difficult period, and the part where we needed to go to the hospital for Aaron's safety and take some other measures. And so that was also discouraging. But it did help that we had read in our book about surviving the loss of a child about how that can happen. And so even though Aaron might not have been in the frame of mind to be thinking about that, I was. And I was trying to keep on reminding her, we're going to get through this too. And then it does get better. But if you're right after a loss, I think it's good to somewhat be prepared for that. There's going to be stages. It might be a little bit more depressing, or you might be in some more despair even than you are at first in that period of 3 to 6 months or somewhere, whatever the process is like for you. But that doesn't mean it's just going to keep on getting worse, or you're never going to be able to come out on the other side.
Yeah.
But you might need some help.
Yeah, you might need some help. And if you have the understanding of that, or have people around you who understand you do need help, that is a major blessing. So, well, Paul, is there anything else you would like to add?
I feel like saying that my wife's incredible, and I'm very proud of her and what she has been able to do over the past year in the face of this loss, because I don't want it to just all be about how we've been suffering and and people have had to support us or whatever. She's amazing. She's blown me away.
Well, there you go. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you.
A huge thanks to Paul for coming on and opening up about his son Henry and all that he and his wife have been through. Once again, if you do need help, please reach out to professionals in your area that can help you. If you're not in a safe place, know that there are people who are wanting to help you. And please keep yourself safe. And if you know a lost mom and dad, please reach out to them. They might just need to hear from you. If you would like, you could head over to our website, stillapartofus.com. There you could find show notes and resources that were mentioned in the podcast. There you could sign up for an email newsletter. There you could find out how you could become a patron and support the work it takes to produce this show. And there you could also find out about how to get in touch with us if you'd like to share your child's story on the show. We'd like to announce that in the near future there's going to be some good changes to the podcast. We are still doing the podcast, even though it seems that we have not been as consistent as the last couple of months. But we are hopefully moving the podcast into a better place, and we will let you know soon what that is. The show was produced and edited by Winter and Lee Red. Thanks to Josh Woodward for letting us use his song, Vanishing Note. You can find him at joshwoodward.com. Lastly, subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend that might need it, and tell them to subscribe. Why? Because people need to know that even though our children are no longer with us, they are still a part of us. Hustle beats talent when talent doesn't hustle. Ross Simmons.